guys, it's Mr. J, and this is another episode of Fanboy JunKtion. And of course, I'm sure you all are just wondering, ooh, what are you going to talk about today? Well, today I'm going to talk about my top 5 cartoons based on comic books. Some of you might go, well, he did top 10 films, why didn't he do top 10 cartoons? Honestly, in my opinion, there wasn't a top 10. There's some honorable mentions, but really there were only 5 cartoons that I really went, wow, those are awesome. They really followed the comic, were loyal to the comic, kind of wove whatever new universe from the comics. That's kind of how I judged it. Let me start out by saying I know that I have dismissed Avengers Assembled on a previous episode because of the art. And, you know, cartoon, you're watching it, art is very important. The art has kind of gotten a little bit better. The past 2 episodes have been really good. In this past episode I just watched this morning, it was kind of a weird, what happened, Thor leaves for Asgard, Heimdall says, hey, Earth disappeared, but it reappeared, he goes back, and they basically kind of did a weird ultimate version of the Avengers. So that when Thor returns, it was interesting. Doctor Doom basically goes back in time and saves all the heroes from the accidents that caused them to become heroes. So because of that, they're basically Iron Man, Hulk, all these characters are loyal to him, and, you know, Thor has to help this Defenders team. Anyway, if you haven't watched it, it's called, I think, Planet Doom. Watch it. It was actually really good. The story's good, and that's what helps me. You know, I'm getting past the crappy art. The story was real good. Another couple ones I wanted to discuss, because I know people are going to ask me. The original X-Men cartoon from the early 90s. I watched it at the time because it's the only comic book thing out there, but never liked it at the time. Watch it now and go, wow, this is really bad. The voice acting wasn't that good. The art was horrendous. And I think they tried to translate a lot of the comic book storylines, but it didn't work because they couldn't either by censors or they didn't have the history. And it just kind of was like a mess. So that show never impressed me. 2 other shows that I'm going to bring up. It's unfortunate because they had horrendous first seasons, but outstanding second seasons. That's Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes and Young Justice. If Young Justice had just been that second season, it'd have been on this list. That second season was incredible. The first season, though the character beats were kind of good, the general storylines, and to me, when I watch something like that, they try to do too much and bring in too many things going on. Too much drama, too much weird stuff. So for that, and the same thing with Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the Avengers one. First season, every episode there was a new character, to the point where you couldn't attach yourself to a single character. You start doing it the end of the first season, but I don't think the actual team was assembled until halfway through the first season. Which, you know, I know you want to build up some story, but for me, again, it just wasn't clicking. The second season was really solid. They brought in some good characters, kind of had everything solidified. They definitely brought into the modern age of the storyline for the Avengers. I think the downfall was twofold. 1, a bad first season means your second season isn't going to be as strong as follows following. And 2, of course, they had to reboot it with Avengers Assembled so that the cartoon could match what it looks like the movies. Anyway, those 2 mentioned. Second season's great. First season's blah. Thus they're on the list. And that's pretty much all the ones I'm going to go. Hopefully you guys can agree, disagree, comment, whatever. But those are why those guys are on the list. So my list, top 5 cartoons based on comics. Number 5 is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003 cartoon. I mentioned it before when I was talking about the new TMT Nickelodeon. That one's not on the list just because it's very limited run and more of a reboot of the original cartoon from the 80s. Not so much a translation of the comics. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon from 2003, I think they just called it TMNT. That was probably the closest to just outright doing the comic as possible. But they had to bring in some more science fiction elements to kind of keep the whole cartoon series going. There's a lot of different beats, different things I saw in that series that were just, again, woven from the comics. I thought Leonardo was probably the best version of Leonardo in any of the different Turtle cartoons. I also liked the action. The action was really good. They kind of did a little bit better job of justifying why they had the different vehicles they had, whereas the previous cartoon, the current one, it just kind of seems like, hey, this is the new toy. I don't mind it, but I'd rather have a story reason why they have something than, oh wow, Raph has a stealth bike because they need to sell a stealth bike of the toys. So for that reason, Teenage Ninja Turtles 2003 is one of my favorites. Ultimately cultivating in one of the best animated cartoon DVDs or movies, which was TMNT Forever, or Teenage Ninja Turtles Forever. Basically had the 2003 Turtles meeting the 80s Turtles, just them meshing and seeing how weird it was. And then from there, at the end, well, I won't spoil it. If you have not seen it, if you are a Turtle fan, you must go find Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Forever. You can find it at Walmart, Amazon. If you do the online thing, find it, watch it. It's great. It's amazing. I can't say how much I loved it and enjoyed it. If you're a fan of the Turtles, you got to watch it. All right, so that's number 5. Number 4 is, again, probably one of the ones where people are going to be like, what? And that's X-Men Evolution. I recently rewatched this entire series about 2 or 3 years ago, introducing it to my middle child, and she fell in love with Kitty Pryde. But I actually fell in love with the series. I liked it when it was coming out. I didn't get a chance to catch it all the time, but the thing of it is that they did change it to a certain degree where, well, not really change it. If you look at the original X-Men were teenagers, and that's what this show is. They've basically taken all of the X-Men and turned them into teenagers. And their rivalry with the Brotherhood is not so much global scale, it's like a high school rivalry. Storm and Wolverine are professors at the school, so they're not really involved in it, which I think is good. You kind of get rid of that weird Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey love triangle that I think is kind of dumb. But you actually saw Wolverine being a mentor, even though he kind of loses his temper and does the crazy thing. Storm, I thought, why not? And then, of course, Professor X is in there. And then later on, Beast comes as another instructor. But for the most part, all of the, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler, Rogue, and then the Brotherhood of Mutants, Blob, Toad, Richter. It was a very cool kind of combination and culmination of a lot of different X-Men storylines and stories kind of brought to a new reboot. With the movies, they kind of made up their own original team, and I think that's what they did with this cartoon. The stories are really strong. The characters were really good. The animation, I thought, was outstanding. And they just kind of covered a lot of the comics. You had the Hellfire Club thing going on. Later on, Magneto had his own team, so a Gambit eventually shows up. It was a lot of different storylines, and they even had Apocalypse show up near the end. Wolverine changed into his X-Force uniform. Really good storylines, and some homages to the original comics. There was a lot. I think one of my favorite moments was it's Angel, Iceman, Beast as the instructor with Cyclops and Jean Grey. And, of course, anybody who's a real comic book fan knows that's the original X-Men. And they're walking to this mission, and Iceman, as he ices up, says, all right, the best team ever. And I just thought that was just a great kind of nod to it. The one thing I will say that is kind of funny, because my wife was watching it and kind of went, hey, is that this is right before the cinematic universe started. So, for Marvel, so Nick Fury is still white. If you don't know, in the original Marvel Comics universe, Nick Fury is white. The whole thing of Nick Fury being black was started in the Ultimates comics and has just kind of permeated into the cinematic universe. And I think even now they've kind of changed original comics so that Nick Fury's black. Anyway, it was a very funny moment for my wife to walk in and go, why is Nick Fury white? Anyway, so number 4, X-Men Evolution. Number 3, it's a cartoon I've been talking about and I'm mentioning. I really haven't had a chance to solidly talk about it, and that is Ultimate Spider-Man. I love this show. It's just the writing solid. The characters are great. I mean, I will admit I'm probably partially biased because I love myself some Iron Fist, and he's one of the main characters in the show. They basically kind of take the whole idea that Spider-Man's been Spider-Man for a year, so it eliminates the origin, because I hate origins, and brings him into his second year, and Nick Fury basically hires him or trains him, says, I'm going to make you the Ultimate Spider-Man, but part of it is you have to lead this team. That team is White Tiger, Kid, the younger version of Nova, Power Man, and Iron Fist, who they've kind of made teenagers for the show, which again, X-Men Evolution, you want to de-age a character to make the show work fine. Same thing with this one. Make them teenagers. I'm good with that. Really good storylines as far as bringing in Thor and Iron Man and Captain America, the Wrecking Crew. I mean, characters across the Marvel Universe are in this show. And the one thing they've done, which has always been an annoyance for me with Spider-Man, is he just more than me. He's just constantly. There was one episode of the 90s show where he did not stop talking the entire time because he's narrating, blah, 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 and it gets really boring and annoying. Well, with this show, what they do is his narration is he breaks the fourth wall. For you who don't know, it means he looks at the camera, everything goes gray behind him, and he has a time to explain what's going on or give his insight or tell the background of a character that's in the show. I love it. Like I said, it has now become the tentpole for Disney's Marvel cartoon universe. So Avengers Assembled and Hulk Smash, it's all the same voice actors. The characters are constantly crossing over into different stories. It's the same voice actors when they cross over. That was just recent one that I talked about with Avengers Assembled, a really good episode. The character of Peter Parker / Spider-Man / Slinger is in that episode, and is the voice actor from Ultimate Spider-Man. So, again, great episodes. The individual writing solid. There's an overall story arc. And the second season just ended. And apparently in the third season, he's going to be joining the Avengers. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to work. If he's going to end up in the Avengers Assembled cartoon as well, or if they're just going to keep his Avengers storylines in the Ultimate Spider-Man. They also changed some of the villain stuff. Very interesting changes that I thought were cool. But go check it out. Let me know what you think. Again, I will say this. It is aimed at a younger audience. Don't look for the dark, intense seriousness. It's very lighthearted. Some of the kind of stuff comes up. Deadpool episode, probably one of the best episodes. And for me, one of the episodes when Wolverine appears, they do a Freaky Friday thing where they swap minds, him and Spider-Man. It is hilarious. Anyway, okay, so number 3, Ultimate Spider-Man. Number 2, I had a hard time whether to include this or separate it out from one of the other entries. I decided it was too strong of a show to not be separated. So number 2 is Batman the Animated Series. This is probably the best representation of Batman ever, especially as it goes forward beyond. But I rewatched a lot of the first season episodes over the past year, and I have forgotten how dark and noir those episodes were. Even though there were times where, of course he's Batman, so he wins, but even when he wins, there's times he doesn't win, or there's a very dark ending for the villain, or he was victorious at a cost. And it was just very surprising how, it was at the time when it first came out, it was a primetime cartoon, it was a Saturday morning cartoon, so there was a much darker tone, a much more adult tone to it. On top of that, the animation style was so innovative and so influential. 10 years after the show came out, you started seeing fans of that, kids hitting the comic book scene, and there are definitely, influenced by this show with Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, and just the character designs and keeping with that. And then the thing I liked is I thought it kind of lost some steam in its third season, where it became more of an afternoon show for kids with the Batman and Robin show. But then they did a fourth season years after that, after they'd started the Superman show, and that fourth season they redid Batman's costume. They brought in Tim Drake as Robin, and let Robin, Dick Grayson, become Nightwing. Nightwing, number 1 character of all time. I thought it was cool that he was in there. They had Batgirl becoming more of it, and it just became it kind of went back to being dark again. So for me, I love watching the first season and the fourth season, but it is, bar none, the second best cartoon based on comic books there's ever been. Which, of course, now that you're thinking about it, I'm talking about this the way it is. Number 1, of course, is Justice League. The Justice League, then continued on to Justice League Unlimited, for me is simply the best cartoon series based on a comic book ever. Ever. They kept a solid cast of characters from the first episode all the way to the end of the second season, and those characters remained for the 2 seasons after that, where they kind of broadened it out. But the reason why I say that is that because it was the same characters, there wasn't a revolving door. You were actually able to link to the characters and get to know the characters and feel for the characters and want to follow them on these different adventures. And though not all 7 of the characters were in every episode every single time, most of them were. And sometimes, even in the first episode, Batman says, I'm not always going to be here, but when you call me, when you need my help, and you will, call me and I'll be there. So he's not even in it all the time. And it was a really solid way to kind of keep these epic heroes on their toes. They definitely gave them villains that kept them going and not be so like, oh, I'm Superman, I can defeat everything. And I liked also that it was a continuation of the Batman show. It was the Batman animated series. It was a continuation of Superman. So there were episodes that went back to things that happened in that show. And that is something that I think is lacking in a lot of comic book cartoons and in the comic book movies, is that without that history and without having a bunch of different movies, you can't reference everything. There's no history being built up. So with that, I loved it. And then in the 3rd season, when they jumped up to Justice League Unlimited, this is where they opened the door and just brought everybody in. Green Arrow appears, and Captain Atom, and Supergirl, and the Question, and Huntress, and Black Canary, and it just goes crazy. And even though they had all these characters, there was only about 2 or 3 characters in every episode. So you were able to still follow the characters and not be bombarded with, whoa, how there's too many people on screen. And then they also did do a great job in the 2nd season, 3rd season, and in the 4th season of kind of having this underlining arc through the whole season so that there was the big finale payoff. And usually the big finale payoff dealt with the original 7 characters. And then, of course, the last season, what made it epic was that it actually almost changed focus away from the heroes and started following more of the villains. My favorite episode of all time is in that, and that's when the Flash and Lex Luthor switch bodies, and it's hilarious. One, to see Lex Luthor with his, scientific expertise using the Flash's body to do things the Flash never does, and then seeing the Flash try to deal with being a villain. It was hilarious. Anyway, so that's my list. JLA, great writing, character integrity throughout. It was just best show ever. So, number 5, TMNT 2003. Number 4, X-Men Evolution. Number 3, Ultimate Spider-Man. Number 2, Batman in the Animated Series. And number 1, Justice League / Justice League Unlimited. Here's my email. Have anything you want me to cover or something you want to ask me? Go ahead and email me. Comment below. Subscribe. Do whatever. I hope you enjoyed this show. Again, kind of running wild. Promise to try and keep them more concise. Anyway, you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.